Hello and welcome back to the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. So over the last 3 months, I have applied to 193 jobs, gotten 11 interviews from 5 different companies, and received 2 offers. In this podcast episode, I'm going to break down the state of analytics in 2024, my resume, my experience applying for jobs on LinkedIn, the warm leads that I had coming to me, and my experience interviewing. I'm going to wrap up the episode reflecting on my experience 7.5 years ago interviewing, trying to break into the space versus interviewing as someone who has 7 years of analytics experience. If you're new here, let me introduce myself. My name is John David, and over the last 7 years, I founded a consulting agency called Silvertone Analytics, where I've worked with smaller businesses directly with their executives and helping them implement analytics. I've also started teaching at Greensboro College 4 years ago, and I'm published on LinkedIn Learning. And I think to date, I have right around 1 million students who've gone through those courses. So I have a very non-traditional background. Me interviewing is probably going to be very different from your interview experience. But stick around in this episode because I think I'm going to be able to give you some actionable insights on how you can better navigate this space. So to start things off, let's talk about the state of analytics in 2024. Relating specifically to the job market. The job market has shifted in a very negative direction. I actually ran a career services program in 2022 and 2023, and there I helped 26 students get their first analytics job. And it is a completely different story. I actually shut down my career services program 9 months ago. Analytics jobs back in 2022 and 2023 were much easier to come by. But the market has shifted, and I am pulling up jobs on LinkedIn, and almost every single remote analytics job that I see within the first 5-10 hours has over 100 applications. And I even experienced this looking into hybrid and full-time roles. So back 2 months ago, I applied to a job with Bridgestone Tire up in North Carolina, and the hiring manager actually told me to my face, yeah, we've had over 100 people apply for this job. That is a little bit concerning, especially if you're trying to get into the space for the first time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I just want you to set your expectations appropriately because there's a lot of people peddling just kind of gimmicky nonsense out there right now. Next, I'm going to show you my resume. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to pause the video and you can see exactly how I formatted it. I'm also going to leave a link in the description so that you can download it and use it as a template. This template specifically I've used to help those 26 students, and we've kind of actually A/B split tested it across those 26 students to see what is the most effective way to get as many interviews as possible. Getting 5 companies out of 193 applications, that's a 2.5% success rate. And bear in mind, I have an MBA, I have 7 years of experience, and I have quite a few quantified wins. You know, the biggest win I have on my resume is I uncovered a $5 million under optimization for one of my clients. If you're brand new and you don't have any quantifiable wins, you may want to not look for a job now, but see if there's a way that you can start to get your hands on data in the current role that you're in and see if you can start to quantify the impact of your work. These are the best stories that you can have that can bring you into the interview. Now we've covered the resume, and feel free to use that template. Next, let's talk about my experience applying to jobs on LinkedIn. For whatever reason, the job market is flooded. Almost every single job that I saw had over 100 applications. That means it is fiercely competitive in a way that it wasn't just a year or 2 ago. But here are some actionable tips for how you can navigate LinkedIn more successfully. So the first tip is you're going to want to sort the jobs by posted within the last 24 hours. The job that I ultimately accepted, I applied a week after they had posted it, and I didn't even get an interview. But then they reposted it a month later, and I was one of the first people to apply. What that is signaling to me is that these hiring managers are just flooded with so many applicants that even if you're a rock star and you have great experience, great technical skills, business acumen, it doesn't matter if you don't get there within the first day. Maybe the first day or two. There's just a very, very crowded job market right now. Piggybacking off that to the second actionable tip that I have is that you're going to want to apply to hybrid jobs. Now, you could apply for remote jobs, but to be fully transparent, of all of the remote jobs that I applied for, I got 0 interviews for them. I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina. The population is 300,000 people. Let's say 5% of them are analysts. Maybe of that 5%, 20% are actually interested in job. That whittles down the applicant pool drastically compared to anybody on earth or anybody in the United States applying for a remote opportunity. One other topic that I wanted to touch on was I actually got warm leads. So these were companies that reached out to me directly because they were in the Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point area, and they were looking to hire their first analyst or new analyst to their team. And the reason that I'm in that position is that, for example, I teach at Greensboro College, and the CEO of one of the local medical supply companies was a Greensboro College alum. And he reached out to me saying, hey, we need a report builder. Do you know anybody? And then that was an easy sell for me. I said, hey, I can actually do this myself. Let's talk. Unfortunately, that job fell through. It was not because I didn't do well in the interview. It was actually that their data was so bad that they decided to not even hire an analyst right now, but rather a database developer because their data was just not usable. I may follow up with them within 6 months or a year. Unfortunately, that job opportunity fell through. One of the companies that I did receive an offer from was a aerospace company out in Winston-Salem. And I think what the hiring manager did was literally he, on LinkedIn, searched analyst or maybe Tableau or Power BI and then filtered by Greensboro, North Carolina. And I was the top result. This is a little bit sophisticated for most job seekers, but what this is SEO, or search engine optimization. What this means is that when people are searching for talent, you're showing up at the top of the results. If you're brand new to the industry, it may be harder for you to do this, but I do think that being active on LinkedIn is a good idea. And this doesn't necessarily mean becoming a data influencer. Getting active on LinkedIn is a smart idea. You don't really necessarily need to be an influencer. What I would suggest you optimize is make sure you have a clear profile picture, make use of the banner space, also have a header that is related to analytics, and then the tools that you are either learning or already established in. With LinkedIn, you can kind of play with the truth a little bit. For example, if you're a marketer, let's say you have a marketing specialist job, there's got to be data behind that. So you could put marketing analyst, or you could put, marketing specialist, parentheses analyst, and then talk about the tools, probably Excel in that situation, or maybe Google Analytics. Make sure you list that out. With your LinkedIn profile, you can take charge of the narrative. You don't have to say, I'm a marketing specialist, but I want to be an analyst. You can say, I'm already an analyst working with marketing data. Here's what I've done. You can think of your LinkedIn page as almost like your dating profile, like a Bumble or Tinder, and you want to make it not necessarily to be the most popular profile. I feel like a lot of these data influencers are just trying to get as many followers as possible. I don't think the followership matters. What does matter, though, is being able to take the hiring manager's perspective in mind and build a compelling profile so that they're going to reach out to you. If you want any guidance on that, feel free to check out my profile, John David Ariansen. I've actually pivoted away from, I was selling to individuals, helping them get jobs, and also just teaching analytics. But now it's more geared towards, here's what I've done as an analyst, and kind of build almost like a sales and marketing lead funnel from there. It's actually funny, within the past, I got the offer 2 weeks ago. 4 days ago, I had a recruiter reach out to me looking to fill an analytics job. So that happens every week, maybe every other week. So if you're really strategic and thoughtful about how you approach social media, it can be a really, really great tool. Don't get distracted by the posts and the engagement. I feel like those people are trying to sell something directly on that. They're trying to sell into consumer. Here, you're just looking to build relationships. Of the 5 companies that I interviewed with, 2 of them gave me an offer. So that's a 40% success rate with the interview. Now, in reality, and I guess I wanted to, caveat this in that 2 of the 5 jobs were with much smaller companies, and the job actually fell apart because, I told you about the medical supply company, but the other opportunity I had was with a construction company, and the VP of IT reached out to me, and he was trying to get their first analyst. Unfortunately, he didn't get buy-in from the CEO, so that job opportunity did not materialize. Really, my success rate was 66%. And I think that this is because of my experience. Go back and look at my resume. I have quantified wins of the work that I've done, and I'm really sharp about how to tell those stories. So, for example, the biggest win I have on paper is $5 million. And there I was working with a retail company that was selling through Lowe's Home Improvement and also on Amazon. And what we were able to do was to boost their pricing strategy by looking at their competitive intelligence. So what I did was I developed a process where we could look at their price and their competitor's price and see where we were either over or under. And then the secondary metric was feedback rating. So in a situation where you have the higher feedback rating but the lower price, the idea is that you can go up until matching and not lose out on a sale because you have the superior good in that specific instance. You multiply that, these are small amounts like 21 cents, 15 cents, 9 cents, but you span that across 17 assortments, which is roughly, I think 1,600 products, tens of thousands of sales for the different products. That added up to roughly $5 million. That's an example of how you can bring your past experience. You want to start with what is the win, and then talk about the business context, maybe even the metrics and the tools you used. In that situation, I used an app called import.io that created a GUI where I could say, all right, go to this web page, pull this product name, this price, this feedback, and then I did that across all of the products and their competitors. And then once I ran that process, it was saved, so we could just refresh it, and that gave them an opportunity to identify where they're the superior product and the lower price and intervene quicker so that they aren't doing once a year looking at their pricing strategy. It can be much more nimble. So that's an example of how you can bring your past experience into an interview. One other interview tactic that has been really helpful for me is that I took the Myers-Briggs, and I know Jordan Peterson is a little bit of a controversial figure depending on, what end of the political spectrum you sit on. But I took his Understand Myself personality test, which breaks down the big 5 personality traits into subcategories. So, for example, conscientiousness, which is one of the big 5 traits, is broken down into industriousness and one other metric. I wrote it down specifically on conscientiousness because I scored in the 99th percentile, which means I'm very, very industrious. Next, I need to take that and turn it into what is your biggest weakness or biggest strength, and coupling that note about I'm very industrious with I'm very extroverted, I'm very driven, I'm quick to make action. Now, when they ask me, what is your biggest weakness, I can say, well, my biggest weakness is that I have a very strong action bias. So sometimes I jump into situations with both feet and it causes problems. So what I've done is I've realized that I need to write down my ideas, and instead of acting on them, I wait a day or two, discuss it with someone else. That extroversion, I love to think out loud. I mean, a lot of times I don't even know where the sentence is going to be ending with someone else and get their feedback. So that's actually what I said in my interview with Fresh Market with my manager. I asked him, what is your managing style? And he said, we meet once a week. I'm more of a coach than I am a taskmaster. And I was able to kind of build off of that or bounce off that and say, well, that's great because I'm so extroverted. One of the best ways I learn is just through conversation. I mean, hence why the podcast is such a good medium for me. I can just talk to people as opposed to I guess this is going to make me sound kind of dumb. I don't really read that much. I listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts, or have conversations with experts or somebody who's in the space that I want to learn more about. And it's more collaborative as opposed to just reading a book and you just consume the information. I like to be able to, if someone says something, be able to pause them, question, say, can you expand upon that? That's how I specifically learn, which is funny because I was not a good student when I was in K through 12 and even in undergrad. By the time I got my MBA, I had kind of figured out my learning style and I was a lot more driven. All right, let's wrap up this episode by reflecting on my experience in 2024 versus my experience in 2017. So back in 2017, I had just finished getting my MBA with a concentration in analytics. And I had 3 internships, so 2 at a very large trucking company that has their national headquarters in Greensboro, and a much smaller company. And I ultimately turned this much smaller company into my first consulting client, but I did have other interviews, and I noticed I had such a scarcity mindset. I had just gone into debt because I had gotten this MBA, and I really didn't have that much work experience. I had 3 years of experience selling insurance on a 100% commission basis. So the sales plus the analytics, hard skills, MBA kind of knowledge about more than one business subject made me somewhat palatable, but I felt like I wasn't an expert. I felt scarce. I felt like there were not that many options and that it was much of a struggle. And I think that mentality really came through during the interview process. Unfortunately, when I was interning at the much larger company, I had 2 bad managers back to back. It's funny because I learned those lessons the hard way. So my students that I teach at Greensboro College, I give them the advice and help them kind of spot bad managers. Because those 2 bad managers kind of set me on this course of, I don't ever want to work corporate. I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to consult. And in hindsight, that was a very, very risky decision of me. I mean, ultimately, I think it worked out moderately well. But if I were to look back over the last 7 years, I probably would have made more money with a stable, lower income as opposed to pursuing the consulting and the teaching and the career services, because my income has been very, very volatile. Some years it's been really high, and then like last year it wasn't a bad salary. It was above the national average, but it was a fraction of what I had made the year previously. So that was very, very stressful, very, very anxiety inducing for me. So I feel like the position I'm in now, going and interviewing with multiple companies, it's a completely night and day difference. So when I'm interviewing in 2024, I actually have a huge amount of wins. I have skill knowledge. I have broad business acumen. So in my consulting practice, I worked with CEOs, CFOs, head of operations, presidents of companies. I was more of a generalist. And the downside of that is that a lot of these jobs, they want the deep business acumen of a very narrow, specific part of the business plus the technical skills. It was interesting because with the other company that gave me the offer, he actually said, I'm kind of stuck in a rock in the hard place in that I need a supply chain analyst, but should I take someone who has supply chain business domain knowledge and teach them analytics, or should I go with someone who has analytics and teach them business domain? Ultimately, he decided that with my skills, I did have some supply chain, but that's not the thing that I focused on the most. I'm much more kind of sales and marketing focused. The job that I accepted with the Fresh Market is a category analyst role. So I am kind of at the cross section of sales, marketing, and inventory. So we're looking at sales trends, marketing, promotions, and inventory, and making sure that all of those are in sync and that, we're not getting stockouts or we're not having our products drop in sales. So, everything is essentially trending well and the demand is being met. Well, that's it for this podcast episode. I hope you found some useful tips in there and maybe gave you some insights into where you could be in a few years if you decide to pursue a career in analytics. That being said, I am probably going to take a break from the podcast over the summer because I'm going to be working full time, learning the ropes at the fresh market. In the fall, when my classes at Greensboro College start back up, I'm sure we're probably going to have some guest lectures. I can bring in some people from my network to talk to the students, and I'll make an effort to record those as podcast episodes. I'm also going to leave a link in the description to my career services program. So I'm no longer going to run cohorts, but depending on if I have enough bandwidth working this new job, I may be open to working one-on-one with students. So there I can help you with your resume, with your LinkedIn, and also how to approach the interview in a much more effective way. Thank you so much for tuning in.